Welcome to Strata. I'm Glenn.
And I'm Brandon. Welcome to the Minds on Muscle podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Minds on Muscle podcast. I am Brandon and I'm with my wonderful co-host.
Hi, my name is Glenn.
And Glenn, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about, I think, one of our favorite exercise topics. We haven't talked about this yet, which is kind of surprising to me. It's pain and exercise. That's what we're talking about today.
Exercise and pain. Now this is a big deep into talking about exercise as it relates to what you're experiencing in your body. In most cases, when people are talking about exercise and fitness, you think about going to the gym, you think about, cosmetic stuff, having better abs, losing weight, doing cardio, running and things like that. But in reality, the majority of us at one point in our life are going to experience some pain, some trauma, a bruise, an injury, or some wear. And how interesting would it be if we could talk about the relationship between struggling with those pains and how those pains relate to what options you can do with exercise, or perhaps maybe what you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, I think that there are so many different things we could talk about on this topic, and we did a little preamble beforehand and we came up with some pretty cool stuff. So I'm excited to jump right into it. Brandon, I think one of the best places to start is, what is pain? And I know you had like a really great way of explaining this. Could you relate to the people what you relayed to me before the podcast?
Well, that seems to be a loaded statement, and I think you're being really kind with my definition of pain. I to be honest, I don't really have a definition of pain, and it's a really interesting conversation because there are so many amazing books out there trying to describe this concept, this experience, and this subjective thing that we deal with called pain. I mean, the challenges we have with pain is really a subjective sensory somatic experience, right? For some reason inside of our body, for either because of a disease, a condition, or one reason or another, something changes and we start experiencing a sensation in our skin and our sensory system and our motor control system and all these different places, perhaps in our joints. And this sensation comes back to our body, and then we have this decision at a conscious level: do we like how this feels, or do we not like how this feels? And it's funny because, I have some clients, and there's some people much like you that will tense a muscle. And they just tense their muscles and they go, oh, that hurts. And they don't like how that feels, right? Their experience of something is tensing or changing in their body, something is not 100% relaxed, is painful or uncomfortable. But in reality, in most cases, very casually speaking, someone just tensing their muscles is not necessarily going to be a pain response to the level of, in most cases, there's a major problem here. While on the other end of the continuum, you might have someone who broke their leg just a second ago, snapped their bone sitting out of their leg, and because of shock and a bunch of other things changing hormonally in their body, they don't actually feel anything. They go, oh, that's not good. That doesn't hurt. Right? So pain is very much a subjective experience, and we have to talk about pain. Do we like what it feels like? Or do we not? And is it even actually pain in some cases? If you have a tense muscle and delayed onset muscle soreness, some people call that excruciating pain. And then some people say, no, that's not pain. I like how that feels. That's evidence that I worked out. Exercise professional education is one of the courses that I teach for, and that many of us here have taken as a part of our muscle system specialist education process. And I think when we start thinking about pain, there's a lot of different elements we can consider. One, as I just mentioned, is the sensory somatic systems, or how are all the sensory organs in our body interpreting information that's coming in at one time? And then how do we interpret that information? Another area of sensory somatic area, so to speak, but also on the other end is our materials. Right? When we talk about materials, what is our tissue made up? What is our bones made up? What are our joints made up of? And there are all these different composites of materials in each of these different areas, and based off of stress from too much dosing or not enough, or because of trauma, breaking, or structural damage, these materials can change their organization based off of what we've done. And each one of those changes, whether it be a small stress for a second, like from a workout and doing just a little too much, or from there being arthritis because we've worn through the hyaline cartilage down to the bone, all will send different sensory information to our body. Thus, we could call that pain or not. What were you going to say there, Glenn?
Oh, it's just, you know what? No, Brandon, I was just going to say that it's actually amazing that there are so many different reasons we could experience this subjective thing called pain. And even just hearing you talk about it and discuss pain in that way and unwanted sensations really makes one realize that how does any professional really say they can treat pain fully when there are so many different things at play that might be causing someone to feel unwanted sensations?
Yeah, I don't know. I find that to be a very tough position to be in. And I got to be honest, we are exercise professionals. Glenn and I mean, this is what we talked about in one of our last study groups. We are really just strength and muscle people, right? What we really do is we design exercises to help influence your strength and conditioning one way or another. And it's really amazing to see how those changes, those contractions, those reorganizations, those skills, if you will, translate to someone feeling better or not. But I got to be honest, I mean, I don't actually understand mechanically, looking at every little detail, how someone can say, I can treat your pain. I can make your pain go away. But from a business perspective, I can see how the consumer would want to find someone like that, because how amazing if you can spend $100 for an hour of work and have someone who's going to make your pain go away.
Yeah, it just feels disingenuous. And I know that you and I both end up seeing a lot of people that have tried sometimes up to a dozen different methodologies and ways of trying to get rid of these unwanted sensations with no avail. And I'm not saying that we are the cure-all or that we are the panacea. That's not really what I'm trying to convey. I'm just trying to share that a lot of people have been promised by a lot of different other professionals, hey, I can take care of your pain. Here's how long it's going to take. And that does sound really, really juicy, especially because pain, regardless of what you're purchasing, whether it's you've got this unwanted sensation in your body that's physical, or you've got some unwanted emotional sensation because of the way you look in the mirror, or whatever that is for you. And it doesn't have to be in the realm of health and fitness. It can be with your finances, or it can be with like anxiety or depression, whatever that is. People love saying, I have the solution for you. And it's just such a complex thing, any sort of pain, whether it be emotional or physical, that it's really hard to say at any one time, I have the cure for you. However, it does seem, at least in the realm of health and fitness, that there are some things you can do to improve the way your body feels. And at least from our perspective, some of it is tied into muscle contraction and the way muscles work.
They definitely play a big role in how easily and well someone can move. I mean, just to double on that point, if you just think about one area of your body, right? If someone comes to you and you're a trainer, or you have a friend that says, I have lower back pain, right? The ominous and very ever so popular lower back pain. There are so many different products created for lower back pain. If we just go back to that whole idea of the sensory somatic stuff, the materials, and the other part that we didn't talk about was biomotor configurationalism. But if we just talk about, and we talked about this in a previous episode, if you think about the lower back and you just think about all of the different tissues and organs that you can even name in that area, right? You have the vertebrae. You've got these discs that are in between those vertebrae. You've got the nervous system and all the different parts that are coming out on the lateral aspect of it and centrally. You've got fascia that's wrapping it. You've got ligaments on the front and back and the side of it holding that crazy thing together. You've got tendons, which then turn into so many different muscles. And then you've got other joints down there. So if you're just thinking about L5, S1 as very local back, you've got this SI joint right next door, and this L5, L4. And you've got all these different things. When someone tells me, I have pain in my back, Brandon, do you think it can change? Well, first and foremost, I always disclose that no one in this building as a trainer can really tell you yes or no it's going to change. But I always say, if you have some diagnostic imaging and you've got some internal views based off of where there's trauma, if there is measurable trauma, you can make a reasonable assumption about potentially what may happen. How do I mean that? Well, if someone has a spondylolisthesis in their back, where there's a fracture from the front and back, from the vertebrae to the pars interarticularis processes, and that whole vertebrae is sliding forward a little bit, right? There's damage there. The part of the structure is broken, and it will not completely heal without some form of intervention. I think it's reasonable to suggest that there's a higher probability that there's going to be some level of pain, discomfort, or sensation in that area, perhaps indefinitely. Can't say for sure, but probably maybe. If someone's had diagnostic imaging and there is clearly no change to any of the tissue, there's no thickness, there's no osteophytes, there's no calcification at any point, and it maybe is just more skeletal muscle sensation, and there's no damage, right? Nothing measurable. Even at the microscopic level that we can see and measure, there's a higher probability that there might be some changes that could happen where you could feel better and have that sensation change. But that is already a more advanced conversation than I would say most folks have with their patients/clients in a therapy or medical or even exercise land. And that makes it tough, because I think there's this disclosure, or pardon me, there's this thought out there that if you have pain because of traditional marketing, it can 100% go away, right? If you have arthritis, the material of your body has changed. Part of the original structures that protected you are no longer there. And that makes it a tough conversation, especially if you're listening to this and you're looking for a panacea to deal with pain, that gets tough.
Absolutely. And it brings up this important delineation between what can be done and what can't be done, or how you want to think about it versus what can we actually do. Because I'm a firm believer in that you ought to treat any situation like it can go away 100% and be open to all the different possibilities. However, when you look at all the data and the information, you have to also be realistic about what you can do and what will happen. And for a lot of people, at least a lot of people that I've seen, and I imagine it's the same for you as well, even just a small reduction in some of these sensations, or to have this sensation maybe always be there, but to go from what they experience as a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 on a daily basis down to 1 or a 2 is a huge success. Or to see the bouts of discomfort lessen and lessen, instead of experiencing every day, maybe they experience it 5 days a week or 4 days a week or 3 days a week. These are all beautiful things. And it's like you said, we can't really make any promises about what's going to happen to you, because at the end of the day, we just don't know. However, with the right data and the right information, we can kind of come up with a pretty good hypothesis of what might happen and then try to test that and see what we can do. I think one of the most important things is that people just try to work at it and not give up, because working at a problem over time is what ends up leading to the results that people are looking for, even if the problem never totally goes away.
And I think, and I don't know if you would agree, but I think working at it for almost all of my clients' perspective, I like to try to get my clients off thinking about the pain and much more thinking about, well, how is this pain influencing you and why are you here seeking help for it? Because in most cases, if someone's experiencing just some discomfort in their level, but they're still able to live their normal day-to-day life cadence and they can continue to do what they love to do, they're not going to look out, they're not going to seek for help because, yeah, I got that thing in my back, right? How many clients have we seen that have a severe pain in one spot, but they got that one little niggle in another spot and that one little ache in another spot, but they're not really worried about it because it's not stopping them from doing what they're doing. I think any sensation that's asymmetrical, that's not quite normal, really should be considered on the table, but more or less thinking, okay, if you have this pain in your back, what is it stopping you from doing? And if you know that it's stopping you from picking up your grandkid, that is an amazing thing to go, great. Listen, client, person in front of us, if your lower back pain really didn't change, but you were able to continue exercising and getting stronger, and you could in a few weeks or months have measurable changes that were going the right direction, that you could pick up your grandkid better. And without that discomfort stopping you, would that be considered successful for you? And in most cases, most of the clients that I've worked with, and I'm sure much like yourself, that's great. That is enough. That pain is not fun, and they do want it managed. But if it's on the shelf and they just know that it's there and they learn more how to respect it, but they can get all the other processes stronger so they can live a higher quality life and get back to doing what they love, I mean, that's a great victory.
Yeah, the too long did not read, at least from what I'm getting from this conversation, is that the unwanted sensations that you may or may not be experiencing, they are not binary. It's not a 0 and a 1 or a yes and a no. It is a very fluid sensation. And some days are going to be good and some days might not be so good. But if you're constantly thinking about what you're working towards and getting your mind off the pain and onto what you're creating for yourself, it goes a really long way in terms of the actual process of feeling better.
It gets dangerous, I think, too, when you start focusing on the pain too much. I mean, in fact, and I made this mistake, and I'm confident that anyone in our world that helps people at this very sensitive level would have also made this mistake. But I mean, I'm very interested in how that client's feeling and how their subjective sensations have changed from week to week to week. But if you keep focusing on that discomfort, that sensation, I think you accidentally enter into this pain cycle by accident, especially with a client who's a little more anxious, a little more nervous, and a little more intra-focused, that if you ask about a discomfort and that discomfort for some miraculous reason goes away and they go, oh my gosh, what we did, whatever that was, that's amazing. It feels great. And then the discomfort comes back. And then that discomfort re-promotes the disappointment and the sadness that came with that original experience. And then they realize they can't go back to the activity that they love. And then they come and see you and the pain sensation didn't change at the same magnitude that it did the time before. Then all of a sudden there's this disappointment of, oh my gosh, this pain's happened. I've got this pain. It's turning into this. And all these hormone and internal changes start to happen where they consciously are so aware of the discomfort that they may or may not accidentally create conditions where it can happen more likely and more readily. And I think if you go online and you look up pain cycling, there's definitely a conscious subjective interpretation side of things where people go, oh my gosh, it's happening again. And it's this really sad and dangerous cycle. And I think it's tough for client, and that's where I think it's great to get clients, I should say, off of thinking about the discomfort, and they go, yeah, my back hurts. And you go, okay, great. Keep me posted how that changes. But what we're going to do today is we're going to try to not, and this leads into, I think, what we should do as far as exercising goes. We're not going to worry about that. We're not going to poke it. We're not going to stick our finger in it. We're not going to roll it. We're not going to attack it too much because there's already too much energy here. There's already too much going on, too much sensory information. Why don't we focus on something else in your body and see if we can create some secretory healing benefits by working other parts?
Yeah, I mean, two things come up for me there. One, another way of looking at that is Pavlov's dog, right? The whole idea that Pavlov, the researcher, essentially conditioned a dog that every time it heard a bell, it would start salivating because it associated the sound of the bell with food coming. Yeah. And this can happen for an infinite number of different ways in your body and possibilities. It's essentially a trigger to a stimulus. And wouldn't it be great if, as exercise professionals, we could trigger people in a positive way, such that, hey, when you do your exercises, it's going to help these joints be more prepared for your day. It's going to potentiate them. They have a higher chance of working better. And the client says to themselves, I'm going to do the exercise in the morning. And just them knowing that they're doing things that are going to help them improve puts them in a better state. And even just being in that better state can help the healing process. I mean, traditionally, at least for the past few decades, healing has been healing, at least in the medical circles, has been very much a mechanical, tissue-orientated, sensational thing. And now, especially with the advent of more research, we're starting to see that, you can actually feel better by thinking about this thing differently and trying new, more holistic ways of looking at it. Take care of your mind and taking care of your body, take care of your nutrition. Treating pain and discomfort with exercise, but also with a whole bunch of other things, including taking care of your own well-being on a holistic level, goes a long way to helping you heal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that idea of the Pavlov's dog, I want to come back to that because there's one thing there on that kind of that classical conditioning side of things in that, and we don't do this here, but I've heard a lot of other practitioners doing it, that in that same cycle of discomfort, feeling sad, right? The bell rings and then the saliva starts to develop. Some practitioners and some family members, even if you experience some discomfort, will give the impression that you've done something wrong. And then people go, oh my gosh, my back hurts. I've done something wrong. This is so bad. Because this hurts, I got to do this and I can't do this. And it gets really messy, really messy. So yeah, I like that. It's a great analogy.
Oh, thanks, Brandon. So, I'd like to talk a little bit about how working with the muscle specifically and getting them stronger and working with that particular system could actually help people improve their sensations. Now, Brandon, I know you teach for Exercise Pro Education. You've taught me through the Muscle System Specialist course. I'd love to hear, in your opinion, how you think working with muscles and exercise could actually help somebody improve unwanted sensations they may be experiencing.
Yeah, well, and I want to hear the same from you, but the hardest thing, coming back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, it depends on where that pain's coming from. Because I think that conversation, I think that's a very different conversation. If someone has structural material damage and that damage is not going anywhere soon, there's always going to be some influence on it and how it influences how the body moves. Versus if someone has some sort of skeletal muscle trauma from overuse injury or something like that, a strain or a pull, something where there's not material tearing going on, that's very different. There's a different healing rate and for that, and there's a very different scenario. But in any event, the skeletal muscle system is really amazing, because if we come back to this idea of biomotor configurationalism, if you think about skills, tossing a ball. Our body learns all these amazing organizations of all these different muscles for everything that we do, right? When we walk, all these muscles on the back of one leg and the front of the other and the opposite side arm and the other arm create this thing called a central pattern generator. And it creates this very nice, even organization where all of these muscles have homonymous connections and work together to orchestrate a movement relatively seamlessly and with less energy and with less thought, in a much more autonomous way. And so we have this for all sorts of different things: drumming skills, exercising. In fact, one of the reasons why I believe when people start exercising, they get so quote unquote strong, they can move more weight faster at the very beginning of exercising, is not because they get stronger, but because they get more organized. They don't have to think about it as much, and then they can associate it to other experiences, and then it becomes autonomous, that they can go through this bench press like motion without having to think about it as much, and then all these potentiation, organization, and so on starts to happen. So How does muscle help discomfort? Well, we know muscle has three different characteristics from a very basic sense, right? It helps with producing motion, it helps with shock absorption, and it helps with stability and congruency at joints. So if there's coming to the arthritis side of things, I think this is a much more interesting one, right? Osteoarthritis is not going anywhere, right? That is damage at the joint. And it is like this magician, 200 pounds, instead of laying on 200 nails, laying on 100 nails, and an uneven distribution of weight. Well, if you have one joint that's arthritic and compromised, doesn't it just make sense that if you could get right, that joint can no longer produce as much force, tolerate as much force, and can't shock absorb the same way. It can't do all the things it did before at the same level. Well, doesn't it just make sense to get the rest of the muscular system so strong and so capable at responding and contracting that it is strong and as stable as possible so it can dissipate that force amongst all these other joints? And that way, if you got one joint that just can't do enough, you can get all the other joint systems and all the other muscles operating at the highest level possible to meet the levels of the requirements of that individual based on what they like to do and for how long they like to do it. I just think that that's amazing. And that's just at the very basic end as far as exercise. But Glenn, tell me about it. What do you think? How do you think this whole idea of skeletal muscle and pain marries together?
Yeah, I mean, Brandon, I don't know if I could summarize it better than you did there, but maybe I'll share a similar perspective, but maybe said a little bit differently. When I look at people who are in pain and discomfort and putting aside, if there's some structural things that we just can't change, that pain might not go away, or what I do might not have any influence on it. However, if it is perhaps a muscularly related thing and I can have some influence on it, I often explain it to people like movement is a puzzle that your body is constantly trying to solve every moment of the day. And your body's trying to solve it with all of its different pieces. And these are all the different joints that you have in your body and all the different muscles that are going to contract to support those joints. And as you start losing some of these pieces, it becomes harder and harder for your body to solve the problem of movement. And one of the things that we do as muscle system specialists is we assess quite in-depthly the pieces that might not be there or might not be fitting or working as well. And our job is to help improve their quality and improve the way they function such that your body has more different pieces to solve the problem of movement. And often when your body doesn't have enough pieces, it tends to rely more on some of them and less on others. And this can cause some kind of discomfort or tightness. So for example, I've got a client right now that I'm working with, and she's experiencing a lot of calf discomfort. And through the assessment that we've done together, we've actually found that her ability to flex her knee is a little bit lower quality, and her ability to dorsiflex her ankle is lower quality as well. And through some of the work in improving dorsiflexion and knee flexion, it seems like the calf muscles are starting to pull less and have less tightness and not contract as much. And it's giving her some relief. Now, all I did was explain to her, I was like, listen, your joints are held together by all these different muscles, and some of the muscles just aren't supporting you as much right now as well as they could be. So by working some of these areas around your calf, and getting them stronger, your calf muscle is now going to have to do less work, and it's going to relax a little bit more, not be as tight all the time. Now, is her pain totally gone away? No. But are the bouts of her discomfort shortening? Yes. Are they happening less often? Yes. Is it helping improve her movement? Absolutely. So this is, for me at least, one of the main ways that I'm taking a look at how can the muscle system start influencing some of the sensations that we're feeling in our body that we don't like so much.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's definitely this notion in pain sensory land that if you've got a pain or a tightness or an ache or whatever it may be, that is the source of the problem. Mm-hmm. And I think that there was a paradigm shift for myself for a while that I'd say that I've even changed from that no, that's 100% not it. It's got to be whatever is necessarily weak. I don't know if it's necessarily 100% that big of a shift, but I do think that if you're experiencing some tension or lack of mobility or tightness in an area or pain, rolling, there's already so much thermal energy going on there from a sensory somatic perspective that taking another piece of information, like sticking your finger in it, rolling it, stretching it passively beyond what it can tolerate, causing discomfort, causing pain, cupping it, whatever you want to call it, I do think is inappropriate. I do think that it gets really, really risky because you already have a piece of the body that's experiencing a huge check engine light. There's a lot of information going on there, a lot of information. And it could be inflammatory, it could be sensory, it could be a lot of different things. And then you're going to take more information. And you're going to put more information on there. You're going to put more kinetic energy. You're going to put more heat, whatever it may be. That's just going to overload the system. And in my opinion, this is my opinion, but much like someone breaking a bone and they don't necessarily have pain for the first few seconds because they're in quote unquote shock because of adrenaline rush and so forth, I think that same kind of thing happens where someone experiences so much pain by someone digging their elbow in that problematic area, so to speak. And then all of a sudden the elbow comes out, and because that pain was now twice as much from that elbow being in there, instead of the muscle being released, that all of a sudden the body goes, oh, euphoria. We've removed the double stacking of sensation. And then there's some adrenaline. There's some other shift that happens where all of a sudden, for some reason, it feels a little bit better. But in most cases, not all, but in most cases, I've experienced clients that sensation comes back. Like you're saying, if you can figure out where the body is performing less well, and you can optimize that through whatever skill development, strengthening, and endurance, you can have the body maybe not necessarily relax that tight area, but at least give other joint systems more responsibility. So if that tension is there because it's so fatigued, because it's been working so hard to contract it, create stability around arthritic bit or whatever it may be, it can relax. I think, again, another opinion thing, and I have no evidence for this, and I'd be happy to explore research that I could, if I could, is that if someone is experiencing a lot of tension in an area, I don't think that tension just happens haphazardly and randomly. I do believe that most of the time, the tension that someone experiences discomfort is much more on the fatigue and exhausted continuum rather than tense. And if you just take that thought process to a tight muscle and you go, I have something and it's really tight and I don't like how it feels. If you think of it as fatigue, it makes it so much easier to address it, because if you said, okay, instead of this tight muscle's villainous and you have to remove that tension, you go, it's really tired. What do you do for tired things? You got to let it rest. You got to give it some support. And that's basically what we do. And in most cases, I find that just resting a problematic area makes huge changes to how it feels and how the individual experiences it.
Yeah. And I just want to double back to one of the things that you said a few moments ago. I've also found, and this is actually something that I learned from you when I started looking for it in my clients. I was like, oh, wow, Brennan's spot on here, is that people can create classical conditioning. Like we said, that Pavlov's dog, they can have those classical conditioning responses to some other modalities. So for example, some people can get used to the only way the discomfort goes away is if they are rolling it out on one of those like fascial balls or a foam roller. And the body learns that the only way the stimulus goes away is by rolling it out. And then that becomes the conditioned way the body learns that this is how this thing goes away. And that becomes almost
we think.
a crutch.
It's going away. We think it's going away. Yeah.
Yeah. And it ends up becoming a crutch. And if there's anything I want people to take away, it's that you don't want to be relying on all of these different crutches in order to feel good. You want to create a system in your body where everything supports each other such that it can, how do I put this here? It can rely on all these different pieces at different times in a dynamic fashion such that no one thing ever gets overworked or overloaded, and the body can dynamically shift the burden around as it needs to in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, and I think that's a funny, this is more of just a thought, and I don't even know if I've talked to you about this, but I wonder at times when we create someone's got a sore back, and then we create an exercise for hip flexion for whatever reason, because we did some QMAMCs, qualitative manual assessments of motor control, they feel better, right? I sometimes wonder, is that exercise actually making a change where the pain sensations are going away? Or is it similar to the classical conditioning dependency that's created with someone seeing a chiropractor 14 times a week? That same kind of idea. But I would say this, that even if that's the case, it's a much healthier option to make it an internal active strategy that doesn't attack the bear, so to speak, and works on other components. And so even if there is this kind of classical conditioning that when I exercise the parts that don't hurt, I'm going to do better, it's great because that back side of the joint where there's some discomfort has now had a chance to breathe. There's some relaxation that happens. And concurrently, you did find something that you're actively internally doing that makes the body stronger and better without irritating the problem, and that exact same piece stacking on top of that gives you more shock absorption and mobility capabilities, which will only help it. And so that's where I think that attacking the pain, I have pain here, I got to roll it, I got to release it, I got to exercise it, just do it, smash it. Pain is weakness leaving the body, like all that's garbage, 100%. And if we can find something that's internally active where the body can learn new skills and new strength, that's the way to go. It's got to be inside you, because otherwise if you become dependent on a thing or a person, if that thing breaks or leaves you, that's tough. That becomes a big problem.
And this is one of the reasons why an in-depth assessment process where you can look at how all the pieces are working holistically is so important, because often, and we've already talked about this multiple times on the podcast, so I won't belabor it too much, but often the root of whatever you're feeling, if it can be helped with some sort of muscular work, is often not ever, I shouldn't say it's not ever, sorry, that was a slip. It's often not occurring at the place, at the movement that you are experiencing it. I've worked with people where if we work on the ankle and knee joint, it does seem to help their back a little bit. If I do work with someone and I work at their elbow and the wrist joint, it does seem often to help their neck muscles. I mean, this system is so intimately connected that working on some areas are going to help you alleviate the discomfort you're feeling in others. And going after the bear, as you said, all the time is, at least from my experience, not actually the best way to attack it most of the time. Most of the time you want to start in areas that are less sensitive, especially if you're dealing with something that's been bothering someone for a long, long time. Because if something's been bothering someone for years, going to that area, probably not going to help that much. Those people have been dealing with that area being irritated by other professionals for a long time, perhaps going to a joint that's adjacent to that one or downstream, maybe one or two joints away, is often going to be a safer bet for those people. And then as they start feeling better, you can start going closer and closer to that joint if you do think that joint needs the love and attention at this time.
I think if I were going to like slowly wrapping this up, I'd say I think with you, I actually have no idea. Really, like the more I learn about this, I have no idea what about exercising makes someone feel better and why sometimes certain things make someone's pain. Like, I don't know if it's an autoimmune response, right? Because people get stung by bees and that creates an autoimmune response. So sometimes it helps other parts of the body, right? I don't know if it's you're just stimulating the body and there's a nervous system influx and excitation and H reflex stuff that we've talked about, post-activation potentiation. I don't know if it's a reorganization. There's more mechanical stuff that can absorb forces. I'm not sure which one it is, but I would say this kind of in conclusion around this is that I do believe movement is absolutely a vital part of vitality in being a healthy human. The better you move, the more you groove. If you can move easier and you can do the things that you love for as long as you can, that's ultimately the main goal. And if you can do some forms of exercise, which I have found through our muscle system and exercise professional process to be a very efficient way, but if you can exercise in a way that doesn't cause problems to the pain areas, that you can feel good at, and you have measurable changes, that you're getting stronger, right? Your mobility is improving because you've measured displacement. You're happier with how you feel. Your sensations are perhaps maybe decreasing or changing in a way that you subjectively don't mind them because they don't stop you from doing what you love. You can pick up your kid. If you're measuring and you're going the right direction, I do believe that stimulating your body in the right ways, with the right forces, in the right scenarios, with the right time progressions is absolutely the best way to make that change. And it has to be measurable. It's got to be measurable and it has to be progressed. And if it's not either of those things, you're not working towards an adaptation that will give you the long-term changes. But you also have to recognize there might be parts of your body, arthritis and things like that, that those sensations are never going to go away. And the more you can learn about them and the more you can learn about your individualized body to promote longevity, the better you're going to do.
Brandon, I couldn't have summarized it any better. Is there anything on a final note that you want to leave people with before we get to our last segment?
Don't do drugs. Glenn, what do you want? No, that pretty much buttons up. Glenn, do you have anything you want to add to that stuff?
Do drugs. No, I'm kidding. There's nothing else I really want to add. And if I guess the only thing I would say is when you're looking at the human body and you're trying to figure out what to do, stimulation over annihilation. I think a lot of passive modalities end up trying to annihilate tissue, or there's a lot of poking or jabbing or a lot of excess force going to those areas, and it feels painful for people when they're doing it. I don't think that's the best way to go about it. I think if you're working through an issue right now, honestly, baby steps is the way to go. Stimulation over annihilation, and that's going to help you feel good on a more systematic level rather than just trying to get right into those tissues every time and trying to, break up whatever people think they're breaking up there. Brandon, I'd love to hear from you. What is your pick of the week?
I'll tell you in 1 second. I want to double back off something you just said right there.
Double
As
back.
you reminded me of one thing. So kind of additional and closing to it, stacking on top of what Glenn said. There was an episode we did talking about adaptations, talking about what you know you want, what you're going for when you're going to the gym. Are you trying to get hypertrophy, trying to get strength, trying to get endurance? If you're someone who started to do some form of activity, whether it be traditional exercise modalities like bodybuilding or yoga or Pilates or spin, whatever it may be, and you found that it's helped you to a certain point, try to think about what it is that the original discomfort you had is stopping you from doing, right? Is it stopping you from sitting in a car for 6 hours because you have to do that for business? Is it stopping you from picking up your grandkid? Is it stopping you from doing a high performance golf swing where you're hitting the golf ball as far as you can? You want to get those 270 yards. Each one of those things have different adaptations that are required that have to go forward. So once you get past a certain point, if you're feeling great, note, do you need to grow more muscle and grow more endurance so you can tolerate whatever you got to do longer? Do you have to get stronger? And perhaps you should consider some more traditional strength training style adaptations so that way you can pick up your 30-pound grandkid. Whatever it may be, just know which adaptation you're going for once you get past exercising and you get past the original introduction to exercising when you're experiencing some discomfort. So Glenn, since I jumped in, you tell me, what is your pick of the week?
So my pick of the week is technology based. And I think most cameras have this. But my pick of the week is the Canon M50 app. So I guess it's just a Canon app, but the Canon app actually allows you to control your camera from your phone. And I've been messing around, taking some pictures from my home, from my website and other professional uses. And I don't like having to use the timer or having to go back to the camera and keep touching stuff and then go back in place. I can actually just pop the app open on my phone and adjust everything that I need to, the ISO, the aperture, the lighting, all this different stuff to create the shots that I want without having to move. And I can even see what it looks like on my camera as I do it. It's made it a lot more enjoyable and a lot easier and a lot more streamlined in order to take these photos. So my pick of the week is the Canon app for my phone. And I'm sure most high-end cameras have this kind of app. It'd be foolish if they didn't. So my pick of the week is this Canon app. Brandon, what's your pick of the week?
I like your pick of the week a lot. I use that exact same app for a lot of different, I haven't used it in a little while, but I've used it for a lot of thumbnails and I've done videos for the website and stuff like that. It works really, really good. So my pick of the week, I've always been a big proponent of trying to stand on the shoulders of giants and trying to learn more and trying to take someone's previous experience and their life experience to learn as much as you can. Which is one of the reasons why I love working with, successful seniors so much is because you hear, 45, 65, 70 years of history of the things that have allowed them to succeed and get to that point. But what I would suggest is if you're an exercise professional, you're a real estate professional, you're whatever it is that you do, I am a huge proponent of professional development and personal development in a lot of different ways, as I know Glenn is. And so what I would suggest, one thing that I've done recently is I've actually hired a drum teacher online from a guy in Australia. And he's 100% helping me reevaluate everything that I do on the drum set so I can learn more and do some things with drum wise and music and studio wise that I'm really excited about. But one thing that I absolutely love about this process is stepping away from the musical instrument thing, because I know I talk about that way too much, is I do think reviewing the basics and having someone observe you with the things that you do in your natural habitat and allowing for you to be open enough to get suggestions and not close off suggestions when you get them. When someone says, hey, try these 5 things, implement them all. Go for it and look at them as an opportunity and learn more about yourself, because I think it's great to learn, okay, if I need to learn something new, I got to do something different. How quickly can I adapt and experience a whole new thing so I can grow? And whether or not you end up using that skill down the road, it allows you to learn more about yourself, who you are as a person, as a professional, and lets you help figure out shortcomings and strengths and lets you move forward. So my pick of the week is try to hire a professional, perhaps outside of your career, to help you improve on something that you otherwise might not want to and might not normally do. But I think it's a cool exercise.
I'm right there with you. I'm a big believer in delegating things that you really don't want to do or don't want to learn about. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of marketing, so I've actually just starting to work with a marketing team to help me redo my website and help me figure out how to get my name out there more, because quite frankly, I just don't know a lot about marketing and I don't really want to learn that much about it, and I find that one of the beauties of YouTube and the internet is that there's so much information out there. One of the downfalls of that is sometimes you're not really sure who you can trust. in terms of the information you're getting doesn't make sense for you. And so hiring a professional to help you with that is absolutely a great way to streamline it. So I'm actually delegating that out. And I just want to put this out there for people. There is an infinite amount of mentors and coaches you can hire for an almost infinite amount of things. And I know money can be a constraint for some people. Don't forget that you as a human being, you've got your own skill set and you've got your own values, and you can always barter what you know and exchange services with somebody if you're having a hard time finding the money to get that thing done. I've done it in the past with some of my services where I trade personal training and muscle care for someone to do a photo shoot with me, for example. So if you're struggling to figure out how to get that done and you're like, you know what, Glenn and Brandon, I love the idea of getting a mentor or a coach, but I just don't seem to have the money for it. Remember, you can trade your skills for their skills and make it happen and make it a win-win for both of you.
Cool, man. Love it. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode, Exercise and Pain. This is a good one. I mean, as you can tell, Glenn and I, it's a deep conversation. I think that honestly, this is a whole weekend course. And then there's a 5-weekend course, Exercise Professional, and that's pretty much the whole course. There's a lot to it. So keep learning, but respect your body, let it rest, figure out what you can stimulate. You want to learn more about it, I'd say find a muscle system specialist or an exercise professional near you that can do a full assessment on your body so you can learn more.
Absolutely. And if you like this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and Podbean. And once this whole COVID thing's blown over, Strata Internal Performance has a brick and mortar facility in Newmarket near Leslie and Davis Drive. We would love you to come by, check out our place once it's safe and healthy to do so.
Everyone, thank you so much for checking out this episode. We look forward to seeing you again next week.
Have a great one, everybody.